Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to Fear Files. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever driven through a small town late at night and just felt like something was off? Like the silence was a little too loud? Well, if you have, then you're going to want to stick around for this one. Today, we're leaving the well-lit highways and the bustling city lights far, far behind. We're taking a detour down the forgotten back roads of Pennsylvania to places that time seems to have left behind, but something else has decided to stay. We are going to step inside 9 deeply disturbing stories from these quiet, isolated places, the kind of places where the worst things are whispered about in hushed tones over a back fence, not reported on the evening news. These accounts, they're not from tourists just passing through. They're drawn from the locals. These are people who grew up there, worked the late shifts, and stayed long enough to see what really lives behind the drawn curtains and the peeling paint. They've seen things that defy explanation, things that have burrowed deep into the town's psyche. Now, as is often the case with stories like these, some names and specific details have been changed to protect the privacy of the people involved, but I can assure you, the fear and the lasting damage are all too real. The stories you're about to hear are a stark reminder that some secrets are buried for a reason. And before we get into today's video, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to Fear Files for daily true horror content. We post stories like this all the time, and you're not going to want to miss a single one. And while you're down there, do me a favor and hit that notification bell so you can be one of the first to see our new videos. Alright, are you ready? Let's get into it. Our story begins in a small, forgotten coal town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place built around a single industry that has long since died. The heart of this town for generations was the old company store. But this wasn't just any store, it was built directly over the sealed-off shafts of the town's original coal mine. Decades ago, a fire had ripped through those tunnels, a catastrophic event that consumed the mine and, according to local legend, a number of workers who were trapped deep underground. The official story was that everyone got out, but the old-timers, they'd tell you a different story. They'd whisper that when the fire got out of control, the company panicked and sealed the mine entrances to contain the blaze, locking the doors and trapping the men inside to be burned alive. It's a dark stain on the town's history, one that people don't like to talk about. Fast forward to the late 90s, and our narrator gets a job at the grocery store that now occupies that same building. On his first day, the store manager, a grizzled local named George, pulls him aside. George looks him dead in the eye and gives him a strange piece of advice, a warning that felt more like a threat. He said, "Listen, kid, I don't care what you do during the day, but whatever you do not work in this store alone after 10 p.m. I mean it. Clock out at 9:59 if you have to. Just get out." The narrator, a teenager at the time, just kind of laughed it off. He figured it was some old man's weird quirk. He had no idea that George's warning was rooted in a horror that had soaked into the very foundation of the building. So, the narrator starts working the night shift, mostly stocking shelves. The store was an old building with a drop ceiling, you know, the kind with those white acoustic tiles. Above those tiles was a dark, dusty crawl space that ran the length of the building, filled with old wiring and pipes. There was absolutely no reason for anyone to be up there, especially not late at night. One evening, around 11 p.m., well past George's 10 o'clock deadline, the narrator is alone in the canned goods aisle. The store is dead silent, just the low hum of the refrigerators, and that's when he hears it, a sound from directly above his head. It's a slow, heavy, dragging sound. Scrap, thump, scrap, thump. He freezes listening. It sounds exactly like someone is dragging their feet, or maybe something heavy, across the floorboards hidden by the ceiling tiles. He rationalizes it at first. It's an old building, it must be the pipes settling, or maybe a raccoon got in. But the sound is too rhythmic, too deliberate. It moves slowly from one end of the aisle to the other, following him. A cold dread begins to prickle the back of his neck. He calls out, "Hello? Is anyone up there?" The only response is the hum of the freezers and the continuation of that awful dragging sound. He knows, with a certainty that chills him to the bone, that he is not alone in that store, and whatever is with him is right above his head. A few nights later, the narrator is once again working past 10 p.m., trying his best to ignore the lingering sense of unease. He's up at the front of the store, cleaning the glass of the automatic sliding doors. It's a cool autumn night, but inside the store the temperature is stable and comfortable. As he's wiping down the outside of the doors, he notices something strange. The inside surface of the glass, the one facing into the empty climate-controlled store, is beginning to fog up. It looks exactly like when you breathe on a cold window pane, but there's no one there. The patch of fog grows, spreading across the pane in a large circular mist. He stares, completely baffled. How is that possible? Then, it gets worse. As the fog begins to dissipate, shapes start to appear within it. Handprints, dozens of them, pressing against the glass from the inside. They aren't normal handprints either. They're smeared and desperate looking, as if someone was clawing at the glass trying to get out. As he watches, frozen in place, the automatic doors suddenly slide open with a whoosh, even though no one is near the sensor. A blast of impossibly cold air rushes out from the store, hitting him in the face. It's a frigid, damp cold, like air from a deep, dark cellar. The handprints vanish as the fog clears completely. He stands there shivering, staring into the silent, empty store, the normal hum of the coolers now sounding menacing. So, the strange occurrences weren't just limited to sounds and apparitions. The night shift workers, the small group who actually dared to stay past George's curfew, well, they had their own set of stories they'd trade in these hushed whispers. One of the most persistent and honestly unsettling rumors was about the vanishing customers. The story went that, on several occasions, a late-night stalker would be working in the back of the store and see a person, or sometimes even a small group of people, just walk in through the front doors. This was well after the store had closed, and the doors were locked tight. The figures were always described the same way. They looked disheveled, their clothes were dated and smudged with what looked like soot, and they never made a sound. They would just walk in, turn down an aisle, and disappear. The stalker, thinking maybe the manager had forgotten to lock up, would go to the front to investigate. They'd find the doors securely locked. A search of the entire store would reveal nothing. No customers, no sign of entry, nothing out of place. It happened just enough times, to enough different people, that it became an accepted, terrifying part of the job. The consensus among the crew was simple: you don't approach them, you don't talk to them. If you see them come in, you go to the break room, you lock the door, and you wait until you're sure they're gone. Because, well, no one had ever seen them leave. This next part of the story, honestly, it adds a layer of auditory dread that spread beyond the walls of the grocery store and out into the town itself. Many nights, long after midnight, a sound would echo through the quiet streets. It was a siren, but it wasn't a modern police or ambulance siren. It was an old, mechanical, hand-cranked wail, the kind of air raid siren you'd hear in old war movies. It would start low and build into this deafening, mournful cry that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The first few times it happened, people would look out their windows, expecting to see flashing lights, a fire truck, some kind of emergency. But there was nothing. The streets were always empty and still. Me and my coworkers would hear it inside the store, a terrifying sound that would cut right through the monotonous hum of the coolers. The sound seemed to be coming from beneath our feet, resonating up through the concrete floor. The local legend attached to the siren was, well, particularly grim. The old-timers claimed it was the original mine disaster siren, the one that was sounded on the day of the fire. They believed that the sound was an echo of that day, a warning. But the more sinister belief, the one whispered by those who had worked in the store for years, was that the siren was a signal. It was calling to something, or calling for something, from the sealed, burnt-out tunnels that lay in the darkness right below the town. In the back of the grocery store, tucked away in a dusty storage area, there was a door. It was a heavy steel door set into the concrete floor, with this big rusted wheel for a handle. Looked like something off a submarine, honestly. This door, according to the manager George, led to the basement. But this basement had been permanently sealed. A thick, welded chain was wrapped around the wheel and padlocked, and the lock was just caked in decades of rust and grime. George was adamant that no one was ever to even touch that door. He said it had been sealed since the mine fire, that the basement was actually the upper landing of one of the main shafts into the mine itself. It was a direct link to the buried tunnels. Of course, being a group of curious, and frankly terrified, young adults, me and my coworkers became obsessed with it. We didn't dare try to open it, but we'd sometimes stand near it, just listening. And on some nights, especially when the air in the store felt particularly cold, we would hear things. Faint scratching sounds coming from the other side of the steel. Sometimes a low, rhythmic banging, like someone was patiently, methodically, trying to knock their way out. The most terrifying sound, though, was the whispering. It was too faint to make out any words, but it was undeniably the sound of multiple voices, a dry, raspy chorus rising from the darkness below our feet. Of all the phenomena in the store, the most direct and honestly frightening encounters were with the shadow figure. It wasn't something you could explain away as a trick of the light or just an overactive imagination. Multiple employees, myself included, saw it. It always happened after closing, when the main lights were off and only the dim security lights cast those long, distorted shadows down the aisles. You'd be at one end of a long aisle, and you'd see it at the other end, a tall, man-shaped silhouette, darker than the surrounding shadows, moving with a slow, deliberate gait. It didn't walk like a person. It glided, moving silently between the shelves of cereal or pasta. The first instinct was always to call out, thinking it was a coworker, or even worse, an intruder. Hey, who's there? But the moment you spoke, or the moment you took a step towards it, it would vanish. It wouldn't run or hide. It would simply turn into a corner at the end of the aisle and cease to exist. You'd race down there, your heart just hammering in your chest, and find nothing, just an empty, silent aisle. The thing never felt overtly threatening, but its presence was deeply unsettling. It felt like it was observing, watching the late-night workers from a distance, a silent, dark sentinel in a place it considered its own. It was a constant, terrifying reminder that you were trespassing. The store wasn't just a place of supernatural horror, it was the epicenter of the town's living darkness. It was one of the few places open late, and it became, in a way, an unwilling confessional for the town's troubled souls. While stocking shelves in those quiet aisles, I would overhear things that were never meant for my ears. I'd hear hushed, frantic phone calls where people confessed to affairs. I'd hear quiet arguments between family members, revealing secrets of abuse and long-held grudges that festered behind closed doors. The town's secrets seemed to bleed out in the low light of the grocery store, as if the building itself encouraged these dark revelations. The most disturbing things I overheard, though, came from the local police. Cops would come in late for a coffee thinking they were alone and talk. They'd talk about cases that never made the papers. A missing person who they were pretty sure was at the bottom of a local quarry, but they could never prove it. Domestic calls that were far more violent than the official report stated. They spoke of the town's decay not in terms of economics, but in a moral sense, as if a sickness had taken root there long ago. It became clear to me that the ghosts of the miners weren't the only things haunting this town. The living were just as haunted, trapped by secrets that should have never left the county lines. After months of sleepless nights, strange noises, and terrifying apparitions, I finally quit. I just couldn't take it anymore. The final straw wasn't one single event, but the crushing weight of all of them combined. It was the feeling that the darkness in that store was active, and that it was starting to notice me. Sometime later, I was talking to my grandfather, an old man who had lived in the region his whole life. I casually mentioned my bizarre experiences working at the grocery store in that strange, forgotten town. My grandfather's face, normally cheerful, became grim. He looked at me with a deep, sad seriousness. He told me that the mine fire hadn't just killed those men, it had poisoned the town. That when the company sealed those shafts, they hadn't just trapped bodies, they had trapped something else. A bitterness, a rage, a darkness that had seeped into the ground and up into the foundations of the buildings and the hearts of the people who stayed. And in that moment, I finally understood. The footsteps, the handprints, the shadows, they weren't just random hauntings. They were symptoms of a deeper sickness. It was then that my grandfather said the words that would stick with me forever. That place, that whole town, it should have stayed buried with the mines. And that's where our journey into Pennsylvania's back roads ends for today. From the whispers of a company store fire to the chilling realization that an entire town might be corrupted by its dark past, these stories paint a pretty grim picture. It's a powerful reminder that the most terrifying things aren't always found in slasher films or gothic novels. Sometimes they're waiting for you at the end of a late-night shift, in a place everyone else has tried to forget. The idea that the rage and pain of a tragedy could literally poison a place, haunting not just a building, but the very soul of a community, is a truly chilling concept. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking with me. I would love to know what you think. Let us know in the comments which one of these 9 stories chilled you the most. Was it the handprints on the glass, the shadow in the aisle, or the grandfather's final haunting words? I read all the comments, and your theories and personal stories are honestly one of the best parts of making these videos. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to Fear Files for more true horror stories that will keep you up at night. We have a lot more dark roads to travel down together, so until next time, be careful where you wander, and be mindful of the stories that old towns tell. Some places are forgotten for a reason. Stay safe out there.